I'm Olek Novak, this is Chasing Cars, and the Toyota RAV4, it's come a long way since it first came out 30 years ago. Back then, the default choice for family cars was Falcon or Commodore. Today, the RAV4 is Australia's most popular SUV. In fact, you could even call it Australia's most popular car if you don't count the 3 utes that sit above it on the Aussie sales charts. Either way, this thing is hot stuff. Demand over its current generation has sometimes meant that wait times have blown out to over a year, over 18 months, sometimes even more so. Such is the popularity of the RAV4. And it's the hybrid that is the big driver of those sales. Toyota's told us that over 90% of RAV4s delivered so far this year have been for the hybrid variants. In fact, in the range of the 13 grades on offer for the RAV4, 9 of them are hybrids. Today, we've got a front-wheel drive cruiser hybrid with us on test. Now, we've had this exact vehicle, even in this color, with Chasing Cars before, and we've previously thought of the cruiser hybrid as a bit of a sweet spot in the RAV4 range. So 6 years into its current generation, it's time to revisit the RAV4 and see if it's all it's cracked up to be. Or is it just marketing and reputation that's driving that demand, as well as a bit of a case of keeping up with the Joneses? We're going to revisit it today, but before we do that, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell below.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
When we reviewed the RAV4 two-wheel drive cruiser hybrid in this very color 2 years ago here at Chasing Cars, it cost $45,710 before on-road costs. 24 months later, we've got the same car with us and it costs $51,510. So it's gone up quite a bit in price in a relatively short space of time. Granted, there have been some subtle changes to the equipment, but the majority of the reasons for those prices going up is actually inflationary price rises. So that's one thing to note about the car. So price has gone up on the RAV4, but what about supply? Well, Toyota tells us that supply is improving. So if you want to get a hybrid RAV4, at time of publication, Toyota's told us that the wait times have improved to about 7 months or less on average, with that forecast to get better over the coming months. So that is a good thing. But after 6 years, how is the RAV4 stacking up design-wise? Well, you'd be very well familiar with how the RAV4 looks on the roads by now. Overall, it's a pretty good looking thing. It's got a chunky, boxy design. I reckon it looks pretty good. Let us know in the comments how you reckon it's holding up after 6 years into the current generation. Now, with the cruiser that we've got with us today, you can identify that by the black 18-inch wheels on the hybrid cruiser variants. Not only that, but you've got the chrome door handles and the silver grille. Now, any color other than white is going to cost you an extra $705 on top of the asking price as well. The interior of the RAV4 just works, if I were to put it simply. While it might not be the flashiest cabin, it's also a bit dark. It's pretty utilitarian, but it's just really functional. It does what it intends to do really well. Now, yes, I mentioned it's a bit dark. You can option a beige leather interior if you like, but I think from a practicality perspective, the black interior is probably a good way to go. It's also not the techiest cabin, but I think ergonomically, the way everything functions is really good. It's not trying to be anything it's not. So one thing that I do appreciate about it is that you hop in, it just feels really easy to use. The controls, particularly things like the climate controls, they're really chunky. They've got a good feel to them. It just feels like a tool that's ready for the job that you're gonna intend to use it for as a family SUV. And all the switchgear feels really nice. The steering wheel feels pretty good in the hand. I like that it's got a traditional shifter that's quite chunky. It feels really good to use as well. And then in terms of comfort, it's also quite nice. So the seats are good. You've got good forward visibility. In fact, the rear visibility is quite good as well. Given the quite boxy design, I actually found this car easier to park than some small cars that I've been in of late. But in terms of the seats, they're good. So you've got 10-way power adjustment with lumbar support and memory settings for the driver's seat, which is good. You've got 8-way power adjustment for the passenger seat over here. One cool thing with the cruiser, you get 3 settings for heated and ventilated seats as well. So really there's quite a lot of features here to make it a really comfortable family cruiser, particularly for passengers up front. In terms of storage, that's quite good. So you've got a decent glove box. You've got a central storage bin over here with a little section over here as well. So that's good. You've got 2 USB-C connections in here, and you've got a USB-A connection over here in front of the wireless phone charging pad. 2 cup holders over here, a little section above the glove box where you can store items as well, which is always nice, and 2 little nifty storage sections over here where you can hold things like maybe if you've got a small wallet or a fuel card like we've got here right now. So that's quite good. In terms of tech, like I mentioned, it's not an overly techy cabin, but it does the job really well. So you've got a 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster over here. One thing I would note about that, while it's got a good layout, the graphics are really good, it does get a bit glary sometimes. So I think if the sun's hitting it, when I was trying to take photos of the fuel readings, it was a bit difficult to see. So that's just something to note, that perhaps they could just work on the resolution at Toyota to just make it more visible when it's got some really intense daytime light around it. So that's one thing. And then you've also got a 10.5-inch touchscreen media system over here as well, which does quite a good job too. In terms of other features, so you've got wireless Apple CarPlay, wired Android Auto, but a good thing about the Cruiser as well is that you've got a 9-speaker JBL stereo system too. Cabin materials are pretty good too, and you've got quite a decent amount of relatively soft touch materials across the doors and the dash as well. So overall, while I mentioned that it's not the flashiest, not the techiest cabin, but I think overall it's quite fit for purpose. We've previously used that term in another RAV4 review at Chasing Cars, and I'd agree with that. It feels like it's a good tool for the job that it's intended for. It's ergonomic, it's pragmatic, it's practical, and I think for what it's intended to do, it does the job really well. Okay, so what are the rear seats of the RAV4 like? And as you can see, they're really good, really spacious. So for me, 6 foot, I've got plenty of legroom over here. Headroom is also good, and the seats are also quite comfy. Perhaps I could do with a bit more under thigh support, but overall it's pretty good. Tow room is not bad at all. As well as that, middle seat, it's pretty spacious, and there is a transmission tunnel, but it's relatively low and pretty wide, so it probably wouldn't be too terrible to have someone here in the back seat. So spacious rear seat. And then there are quite a few amenities too. Let's start off with the ambience of the rear seat. And while it is still quite black in the rear, you do have some good soft touch materials here at the top as well. So that kind of increases the ambience, which is good. You've got a map pocket here behind the front passenger seat. You don't get one behind the driver. You do get 2 rear air vents, 2 USB-C connections down here below as well. And you've got a center armrest with 2 cup holders. Now the rear seats for long journeys, you can also recline them slightly into positions as well. And of course they do fold down 60/40 as well if you want to increase the literage of the boot as well. It's also worth noting you can't get the RAV4 with a 3rd row and 7 seats. If that's important for you in a mid-size SUV, then other nameplates you can look at with 7 seats or 5+2, dependent on grade, include the Honda CR-V, Hyundai Santa Fe, Mitsubishi Outlander, Nissan X-Trail, Skoda Kodiaq, and Volkswagen Tiguan. But of course, if you want a hybrid with a 3rd row, then your options are very limited. The X-Trail and CR-V hybrids don't come in 3rd rows in Australia. You can only get the 3rd row on their pure petrol variants in Australia. So you'd be limited to vehicles like the Mitsubishi Outlander. However, unlike the RAV4, that's a plug-in hybrid. So you might have to consider something like the large off-road focused Tank 500, but that is technically in the category above. Let's check out the boot. One thing that we've always found a bit annoying here at Chasing Cars is the beeping on the electric power tailgate. If you want to remove things stealthily from your car, then the RAV4 probably isn't the best option for a family SUV. But otherwise, in terms of the boot, so you've got 542 litres of boot space here in the boot with the 2-tiered floor in its normal high position. You can put that slightly lower to make it to 580 litres of boot space as well. Now you've got a pretty low load lip, which is good. It's a pretty wide opening. So overall the boot is a pretty healthy size. In terms of other amenities in here, you've got a little section over here that you can store items as well. And you've got a cargo cover that you can roll out too. So that's pretty good. And another good thing is that you do have a spare wheel. So it's not a full-size spare, but at least you have one instead of a puncture repair kit. So that is a good thing about the RAV4. So let's close the boot. Now, while that beeps behind me, one thing to note is the towing capacity. So on the hybrid, let's just wait for that to finish beeping. There we go. So on the front wheel drive hybrid, it's 480 kilograms of brake towing capacity. So not very big. If you step up to the pure petrol variants, that goes up to 800 kilograms of brake towing capacity. And if you want 1,500, so 1.5 tons of brake towing capacity, you'd have to go for the all-wheel drive hybrid. So that's just something to note if towing is a priority for you. So being a family SUV, we've got to test out, is it fit for purpose for a family with some baby seats? So we've already got one forwards facing baby seat in there behind the driver. That's fitted in really well. We're now going to load the rearwards facing baby seat into the RAV4. So the benefit is, being an SUV, you don't have to bend down too much to get that in there, which is a good thing. Secondly, the door opening is relatively wide, and this area here, it's quite easy to fit the rearwards facing baby seat in there, so that's good. It fits in really nicely. One thing to note is perhaps there's some mild compromise for the front passenger in terms of having to move that seat forward enough to fit the rearward seat in there. But otherwise, it does a pretty decent job in terms of fitting 2 baby seats in the back. So let's chat running costs for the RAV4 Hybrid front-wheel drive. Now, it can take 91 octane fuel, and the front-wheel drive hybrids have a claimed consumption figure of 4.7 litres per 100 kilometres. Over my time with the front-wheel drive cruiser hybrid so far, I've averaged 5.1 litres per 100 kilometres. So that's pretty close to the 4.7 litre claim, which is a good thing. And that's been over a mixture of urban driving, a bit of highway, and some B roads as well. In terms of the other models in the range, the all-wheel drive hybrids are quoted at 4.8 litres per 100 kilometres, and that compares to 6 litres per 100 kilometres for the 2-litre pure petrol and 7 litres for the top spec Edge that comes with a 2.5 litre petrol engine and all-wheel drive. Based on claimed figures, you're going to be saving about $390 a year on fuel based on a 15,000 kilometre per year mileage and an average cost of fuel of $2 a litre. So that's going to take you just under 6.5 years to make back based on the $2,500 premium the hybrids ask. In terms of servicing, intervals for the RAV4 are every 12 months or every 15,000 kilometres. Services are going to cost you $260, so over 5 years that's going to be $1,300. So that's pretty fair as well. And in terms of warranty, that's 5 years, unlimited kilometres. The RAV4 is a safe family hauler too. It's got a 5-star ANCAP crash safety rating, and it's packed with lots of passive and active safety features. That includes AEB, lane departure alert, lane trace assist, road sign assist, auto high beam, active cruise control, a blind spot monitor, rear cross traffic alert, a 360 camera, and 7 airbags. During my time with the car, I found the safety systems to be pretty well calibrated too. The lane keeping wasn't too intrusive for me, and the radar cruise control worked pretty effectively too. In the Cruiser Hybrid 2-wheel drive we've got here today, we've got a 2.5 litre 4-cylinder petrol-electric powertrain, and that delivers combined outputs of 160 kilowatts and 221 newton meters of torque. If you're going pure petrol, you have 2 engine choices to go for. A 2-litre petrol engine, which delivers 127 kilowatts and 203 newton meters, or a 2.5 litre 4-cylinder available on the top spec Edge, which delivers 152 kilowatts and 243 newton meters. But if you're going hybrid, you also have the option of spending an extra $3,000 over the front-wheel drive variants to access all-wheel drive hybrids. That'll also get you an extra 3 kilowatts and a torque bump, although it's undisclosed by how much. So how does the 2-wheel drive cruiser hybrid go on the road? Well, pretty well overall. I think it's a really competent package, and let's start with talking about the hybrid powertrain, because that's where Toyota's had a lot of experience, and naturally with the RAV4, most people are buying the hybrids, and I can understand why. It's a really smooth and efficient vehicle, and on the road I think it particularly excels just as that urban runabout, transporting the family, particularly around the suburbs, because particularly when it's running on just its pure electric power, it's a really smooth and quiet vehicle. It's really serene inside because it's just running on the electric motor. Then when it does transition to the petrol motor, that's also really smooth. Naturally, you'd expect that from Toyota by now, but again, it does a good job. You do eventually hear the engine kick in, but you don't feel it. It's quite a smooth transition. Now, some people may lament the fact that it has a CVT gearbox. And look, pragmatically speaking, I think it does a good job. For most people, for what this car delivers, I don't think that it'll bother them. It's an effective unit, it couples well with the powertrain, and it ultimately, in the overall complete package of what this vehicle delivers as an efficient family hauler, I think it works well in that regard. Is it a sporty powertrain? No, it's not. So that is one thing to note. Perhaps when you are really pushing it, the CVT might sound a bit whiny like you'd expect from a CVT, but overall, I don't think it really detracts from the overall package that this vehicle is trying to deliver. Naturally, if you're someone who prefers a bit more oomph in your drive experience and wanting something a bit sportier to drive, then maybe this wouldn't be the best SUV for you. But ultimately, for the majority of buyers, I think it would be totally fine. Now, I haven't driven the all-wheel drive versions of the hybrid. The rest of the team at Chasing Cars have, and from previous reviews and their comments, I know that some of the team did definitely appreciate the extra torque and the grip that the all-wheel drive offers. So if you want a bit more oomph from your drive experience, that is definitely a vehicle worth testing out side by side to determine if that extra $3,000 would be worth it. But I think for what it's worth, the front wheel drive will probably be effective for most people. We've previously performance tested it here at Chasing Cars on our test track. From 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, we did that sprint in 7.64 seconds. That was our best time. So it goes pretty well. Some people might want more, but I think for what it pitches itself as, this is an effective powertrain overall. In terms of the ride, the RAV4 delivers a really compliant ride experience. So we're driving on 18-inch wheels here, and they seem to take the worst out of the road. They soak up bumps and imperfections really well, and I think it's a pretty cushy ride. So I think in that perspective, it's a really comfortable car, which adds to that kind of complete package that it kind of offers. In terms of the handling, look, again, like I mentioned, it's not a sporty SUV, but it handles pretty well. It seems to have hints of a relatively communicative chassis. It's really easy to steer and handle through a set of bends. And I think for a mid-sized family SUV, it does a really decent job navigating a twisty road as we're doing right now on our test track. The steering, it's really light, predictable, faithful to your inputs. So I think it's quite easy to plant the car on the road. And again, it is part of that really good, easy to drive experience that the car offers. The car does feel quite planted, whether you're on the freeway or just on a country road as well. So that is another good element about it. So overall, just in terms of the drive experience this car delivers, it's just a really good tool for the job. It's quite a utilitarian experience, but for most people's needs, provided they're not after the flashiest or sportiest experience, I think they're going to be quite happy with this. You've got other competitors out there like the Nissan X-Trail e-Power or the Honda CR-V as well that you could cross shop, but in terms of claimed efficiency figures, the Toyota RAV4s are the best. So overall, depending on what you want out of your drive experience, the RAV4 does a pretty good job. So there you have it, 6 years into its current generation. Despite the price rises, despite the wait times, the RAV4 still offers a pretty complete package for a mid-size family SUV. But what do you think? Have I got it right about the RAV4? Would you get a RAV4? Would you get the front wheel drive, the all-wheel drive? Which spec would you get? Would you get the hybrid, or would you get another mid-size SUV entirely? We'd love to know what you have to think, so make sure to let us know in the comment section down below. While you're there, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.